started, I would like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. We've taken a screenshot of an example of the attendee interface. You should see something that looks like this on your own computer desktop in the upper right corner. You've joined the presentation in a listen-only mode using your computer's system speakers by default. If you would prefer to join over the telephone, just select Use Telephone in the audio pane, and then the dial-in information will be displayed. You'll also have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenter by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect these questions and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. I would now like to introduce Mark Wiskup, our moderator for the event.
Hello from coast to coast, and welcome to Fridays with Vistage. My name is Mark Wiskup. I'm joining you from Tampa today. Our guest, our presenter today is Jaynie Smith. She is on the other side of the Florida coast for me, down in Fort Lauderdale. And as you've gotten promotion for this and as you signed up for this, a lot of people out there in the Vistage community know Jaynie in a number of different wonderful professional ways. First of all, her book is an international bestseller, Creating Competitive Advantage. It's rare that an author gets to the second or third printing. Well, this came out 5 years ago, and the publisher has had to gone into now its 11th printing to meet the demand for the book. So Creating Competitive Advantage, it's on Amazon. It's absolutely fantastic. Great reviews, and it's just great for every entrepreneur. Secondly, you've heard of her. You've read about her. She's been an entrepreneur, Industry Week, Investors Business Daily. She's also a regular guest on the ABC World News This Morning, MSNBC, all kinds of radio shows. When business experts want to find out someone to help them with management expertise and getting a leg up on other people, they turn to Jaynie Smith. Finally, I could keep going with the resume, but Jaynie is one of our own. A tech chair in Florida for 22 years. Amazing. Today, she's going to tell us how to stop wasting money or the cost of wasting money on doing stuff that's not right. Jaynie, you've got a ton of stuff to go through, so I'm going to turn the program over to you.
Why, thank you, Mark. I appreciate it, and I'm excited to do this today for the community. So, I'm ready if our listeners are. So we're going to be talking about the price you pay for irrelevant marketing messages, and I'd like to expand on this point for a minute because this webinar and the next book I am going to release this summer is based on the premise of the first book and some steps, and I'm going to talk some more about that now, but it's based on actual research. This isn't stuff I'm making up as we go. So, you know, just a footnote, if you're a Twitter user, you can follow along or comment with others on Twitter. We've set it up to do #JLS Web for you Twitter users. I don't know how you multitask like that. I can't do it, but I was told this is a good idea. Okay, so let's talk about what's in today's webinar. What is irrelevant messaging? Well, in a word or two, it's simply that which does not connect or align with your customers and what they want from you. And how often do you need to change the message? It is amazing in our research how often we find stale messages and how infrequently companies of all sizes, and we do work with everything from small Vistage companies to Fortune 500 companies, and we see many, many of these things over and over again. We're going to talk about the difference between relevant messages to customers versus prospect messages. Very few companies do a solid job of segregating these messages, and sometimes our research shows they are very different and should be very different in what a customer values and what a prospect values. We're also going to talk a little bit about the relevance for each target market. How do we differentiate those? And again, our research shows very few companies take a really good step or really do this well in delineating the differences in their marketing and sales messaging. Finally, all of this is irrelevant if we don't have internal alignment to support those messages, and we're going to talk about that. I'm going to give you, as is my favorite thing to do, lots of case studies from companies we've actually worked with, and some of whom are Vistage members who very nicely gave me permission to use them today as examples in this webinar. So I like to go to a value proposition definition that we found a couple of years ago when working with a Fortune 500 company. The source is Future Sight Consulting. I have sourced many, many value propositions, and this is my favorite definition. A description of the value you're offering will provide to your customer segment, customer or individual, and that is, and this is key, that is relevant, measurable, and relative to alternative choices. When I speak to Vistage groups around the country, or any group for that matter outside of Vistage, I always ask them, do you know what's relevant? And do you have a written value proposition? Now, I don't really care if a company has a written value proposition, but I do care if they know what it should be in terms of a culture supporting a value proposition. Very few have written ones, that's okay, but do we know what's relevant, measurable, and really relevant to alternative choices? I want you to just keep this in mind. Forget about it for a minute. I'm going to come back to this at the end of the webinar and show you how it all ties in. So let me explain a little bit. The genesis of this data and my next book comes from the first book. Mark told you about creating competitive advantage. I've been talking about this all over the world. This first book, for those of you who are familiar with it, has everything to do with identifying your competitive advantages. What are they, and how do we say them? So that's the first book. So in the process of helping companies do this, we have a process that involves market research. We may come up with 50, 60, or you may come up with, if you've read the book, a basket full of competitive advantages. We want to be careful we don't just throw these competitive advantages at the wall, because in many cases they're not relevant. And I'm going to show you several examples of that as we get into it. So we've done research or analyzed market research. And I have to point this out. This is really critical because we're going to ask you a question in a minute. Double-blind market research. Double-blind means your customer does not know what your company is asking, nor do you get to know what specific customers said. But the aggregate data will tell a company what the preponderance of their customers and or prospects look for when making a buying decision. So after analyzing over 125 companies that we've done this work with over the past few years, we've discovered a lot of amazing statistics which we're going to share with you going forward. So this presentation, this webinar, is based on Book 1, the process talked about in there, and specifically the analysis of what these companies were marketing, how irrelevant it was, and how we got them relevant, and how you can get your messages relevant, just so you know. So just remember, double-blind research removes the bias, and it tells you what your customers and prospects value without having any bias built into it. So what is irrelevant messaging? I love this cartoon. Why don't we do what we always do when sales lag and write a new and improved on the box? Why that's a silly cartoon. What it demonstrates is what do we do when we need to sell more versus what should we do. Many companies will show irrelevant messages because it's their idea of how to sell better. So now is the time for the first poll.
Our first polling question is, when was the last time you invested in outside double-blind market research? Everyone, your viewer window has been filled up with this question. What you'll want to do is go ahead and click on the box that's next to the answer that you would like to choose. Currently, I'm showing that about 50% of our folks have voted. I'm going to keep the poll for another 10 more seconds, and then we'll send out the results to everyone.
Okay.
Looks like just about everyone has voted. I'm going to go ahead and close out the polls and share those results. Jaynie, the results show that 82% of our audience selected never, 5% selected in the last 12 months, 1% selected 2 years ago, and 11% selected more than 3 years ago.
That's fantastic because that's totally in alignment with my personal surveys that I do when I speak to Vistage groups. I ask that question to groups, and that's about what I get. It's more like what my experience is about 90% have checked never. So you got a little bit higher with this group. So let's go on and talk about this for a few minutes. Our research shows over 90% of companies have marketing messages that are not specifically relevant to potential buyers. They may not have conducted market research, so they don't have the voice of the customer. And here's what we have seen again and again. Every time we go back to a company that's gone through this process, we always ask them, look, we now know what's critical to your customers, but before we show you those things, we want you guys to vote. Your whole management team vote on what you think it is. And that's how we know this to be true, because they will vote, and over 90, and I'm being gracious when I say 90, but more like 95% get it wrong. So they say that they think A, B, and C is important to their customers. We tell them, we show them that the research findings from their customers actually say it's DEF. So we want to make sure we're not marketing an irrelevant message, and we're not out there saying you should buy from us because of ABC. And again, I'm going to show you some examples, and we're going to dig deeper on this one. I like to talk about, before I move on to actual Vistage examples, I want to talk about Hyundai. Hyundai did this wonderful thing in the recession, and I know everybody's probably familiar with this, but most car manufacturers are out there. You pick up any newspaper, and their ads are just touting, particularly in the recession, rebates, incentives. Well, Hyundai did some research. They got the voice of the customer, and they did not go after rebates and incentives. If you recall, they said, we'll buy back the car if you lose your job. That was a huge hit. They had a message and an operational decision, made an operational decision to have a competitive advantage that was relevant to customers. And guess what? In the recession, they were up 14% when sales for Ford, GM, Honda, and Toyota dropped. That's a classic example about the difference between relevant and not. Another one, you know, recession, I like talking about recession ones. The housing market became more relevant because they started to build smaller homes and more affordable homes. The floor plans used to be gigantic, and then in recession they got smaller. They were being more relevant, and they were advertising more relevant. So let's move on with this. So we want to make sure, to be relevant, you're not marketing to A, target market A, what target market B wants, or to target market or customer C what A wants. And that's an oversimplification. You'll see that come alive in a couple of the examples. Each customer segment requires their own relevance, and we very infrequently do this kind of marketing. So let's give an example here of a Vistage company, 352 Media. They are a Vistage company, and we had the opportunity to go through our process with them and analyze their data. So here's what 352 was doing, like so many web companies. They were touting, they had this fantastically fun website, and they're amazingly creative people. And you can't see it live here because these are screenshots, but the owners would come up and they would talk about how 352 has won awards, design awards. They've worked with Fortune 500 companies, and they touted the size of the company. Here's what it looked like. Here's our awards. You can see that screen, the award-winning web design company. And here's how they touted their Fortune 500 companies. Look at who they worked with: Microsoft, CNN, just fantastic companies. And then they touted their employees. 50-person team, specializes in helping startup ventures. Okay, on the surface, what do we think? Well, kind of good, I guess. Well, we go and we do the research, or the research company does the research for their customers and their prospects. And what did they learn? They learned that the least important attributes when choosing a web development company, according to their customers and their prospects, were size of firm, firm manages Fortune 500 companies' websites, and they won design awards. Okay, so how scary is that? So now I just want to point something out here. I'm using website examples because it's the easiest to show you in this webinar. But this is true. This kind of information is prevalent in many companies' marketing brochures, their sales pitches, at their trade shows. They use these messages. And as you can see, 352 had their message upside down. They were touting the things that their customers and prospects did not use as buying criteria. So what did they do? They found out what was important. Winning designs, working with Fortune 500 and size of company was ABC. That's what I was talking about. We don't want ABC, but what was DEF? DEF was customers said, we want to know you can respond quickly. We want to know you can assess my marketing needs and incorporate them. And we want to know we have full ownership of the website. A lot of companies get surprised when they get finished paying a lot of money for a website and they don't have their own access to it. Well, they did that. They just didn't talk about it in the sales encounter. So they changed their message. This is relatively new. They're just working on their website and changing it on their website. But I talked to the CEO the other day, and he says while they're updating it, they used this data. They found out what was important. They talked about what was important, and they landed a very big company client, a huge company that they've been trying to get for a while. And they stressed that the client owns all of the work produced. Well, the client said that was the deciding factor. They didn't care that they had Fortune 500 companies. They didn't care how many employees they had, but this was important to them, and that's what they talked about. So, what are you using? How do you know it's important? Other web I've got to show you this. So I threw in a couple more. We looked at some other web companies to see, and here's what we found. Here's a Lightmaker wins IMA award for website design. Award-winning web design agency, some company called Liquid Light. I don't even know if these companies are in Vistage or not. We just pulled some because it's rampant. Another one, Fortune 500 companies. Here's another kind of company touting awards. And here's another kind of company touting awards. So here's the point. We want to make sure what we're touting in our marketing, whether it's a website or brochure or sales pitch, is relevant to what customers actually value, not what you think they should value. And too often, that's what companies do. We're proud of our awards, so we talk about it. Another thing we do is we tell them what they should value because we value it. And that's not always in alignment with buying decisions. So it really is important we get in alignment with their buying decisions. So what I call these messages that you've just seen, I call it the low-hanging fruit. Low-hanging fruit means, well, these are easy things. These are things we think we should be touting, and therefore we're gonna throw these at the wall and hope they stick. Now, at the risk of sounding pejorative, for many of you, you're thinking, well, it's working for us. You know, we're successful, and I'm sure you are. You wouldn't be in Vistage. But what might you be leaving on the table? If we got closer to alignment and more relevant, how might we close another 10%, 20% more business? That's what we shoot for when we're working with our clients. We want them to increase their close rate. And not only that, have higher customer retention. So here's another thing I want to share with you. When we have analyzed this research for the over 100 companies I've been analyzing for the second book, there are some common denominators, and I want to stress these things are not true 100% of the time, but predominantly these are the things we see most often that companies out there lead with, yet in research they rank very, very low in customers' buying criteria. So many companies want to start with how long we've been in business, and we're a family business. Ranks low in buying criteria. Equity ownership. We've had 2 or 3 companies who led with the fact that employees were equity owners was a good reason to buy from us because we care more. Did not rank high, and in one company it actually ranked dead last. Green and sustainability is one that shocks us from time to time. Depending on your business, and I want to stress something, this applies to B2B as well as B2C, not just this list, but everything I'm talking about. Green and sustainability, unless you're in an industry where it's required and demanded, it's shocking how low that comes in as a buying criteria. Because a lot of people know that it's politically correct to say that they're green and sustainable, but may not make it a buying criteria. Longevity, awards, not ranking high ever. And of course, my favorite one, if you've read my first book, I talk about how price is almost never #1 as a buying criteria, but because so many of us hear it all day long from our customers and forget that they are, in fact, negotiating, we actually buy into the premise that price is a tiebreaker. Again, I'm not naive enough to know it isn't in some cases and in some industries, but you would be surprised how quickly you can get off of price. The analysis we've done of the research of the companies we've worked with, again and again, when companies are asked how they value price, or when asked what else is important, maybe 5 to 10% of customers bring up price in an open-ended question. It's really very, very significant. So, you know, at this point, oh, and just another point, I'm not just talking about research that we've analyzed, but we went to about 5 market research firms that we've had relationships with, and we said, look, we see price come in at the bottom of the list again and again. Is it an anomaly with the clients we have, or do you see it? And we've had 5 market research say it comes in the bottom 25 to 35% again and again. So, you know, if you can get your people off of selling price, you'd be surprised. Sell value and be relevant, and you can get farther and farther away from price as an issue. Okay, so the flip side, you know, what are some of the things we don't talk about? And here's one of the things that we have seen in the last 2 years. Since recession, we have seen financial stability come up as relevant for buying decisions again and again, yet we see very few companies touting their financial stability if they have it. This is just one example. Again, all of these things I'm telling you are not true across the board. There are going to be anomalies out there, but we're talking about the preponderance of the data we see says, I want to know the company's financially stable. And we have seen that come in as 1, 2, or 3 in top attributes for buying decisions in the last 2 years. We have not seen that in years prior to the recession, which is interesting, which means this is a moving target. So here's the key. I just can't stress this enough. I'm giving you examples, and I have to tell you, what I'm showing you here are not exceptions to the rule. Over 90% reflect these things, and you need to be cautious of that in your own company's messaging. So just some recommended actions for you. Review your website. See if you and your competitors have a lot of Me Too stuff. And find the similarities and differences. Where are you saying things that are different? And review it frequently, because it's pretty hard to know how they're changing things and catching up with you. So now I think we're up to poll number 2. So are we there for poll number 2?
Our second poll is, how often do you review your message vis-a-vis customer needs and the competitor's message? Again, just as a reminder, the polling question will show up in your viewer window. Go ahead and select the answer that best suits you. So far, I'm showing we've had the poll open for about 15 seconds. We have about 60% voted. Let's go ahead and wait another 5 seconds, and then I'll go ahead and close the poll. All right, looks like we have majority of our answers in. Our results, Jaynie, it looks like we've got a pretty even lineup here. 17% selected never, 24% selected monthly, 27% quarterly, and 31% selected annually.
Okay, good. Thank you. I appreciate that. Again, we're always interested to see how other folks do it and what their findings are. We have seen more companies not review it frequently, as much as a quarter, than this group is telling us, but it doesn't matter. I think it's something people need to keep in mind. I'm going to give you a quick snapshot of a company we did this work with in 2006 and 2009. I'm going to demonstrate change in time, and this is 3 years apart. I think this work needs to be reviewed at least annually. It'd be great if you could do it at least twice a year, and quarterly would be astounding. So this company is a home health care agency, and in 2006, when they went through the process, their research showed them that their customers are doctors who refer home health care. And the doctors who referred to this home health care agency wanted to know they had solid patient outcomes, which they did. In fact, this is also a Vistage member. So what did they do? Here's an example of their website. They talked about outcomes. I won't spend a lot of time here, but 34% of VNA patients are less likely to be admitted to the hospital. 22% less likely to go to emergency room, 23% better at getting in and out of bed after our home health care, and 22% better at walking around. And it goes on and on. So I just want to point out they receive this information quarterly. Because it's healthcare, they were able to compare to their competitors. So keep that in mind. If you have industry data, always try to compare yourself favorably to your competition. So they touted this, and they got crystal clear on what their doctors who referred to them wanted, and they had a dramatic result. I'll show you that in a second. In 2009, they went through the process again, and their research showed very different buying criteria. The doctors who referred to them said, we want communication, not just real-time computer data on our patients, but we want to be talking to the home health care aides and company on a regular basis to know what's going on. Well, they thought that they had done a phenomenal job with this, and when asked, how do you rank relative to your competition, they didn't score so high. And in the middle of presenting this, we were surprised. The CEO got up and started to walk out of the room, and we said, hey, where are you going? We're not done yet. He said, I'll be right back. I'm going to go to HR. He said, I let go of my HR director 3 years ago, and I never refilled my my communication director, my VP of communication, 3 years ago, and I never filled the position. And now look, it's come back to shoot me in the foot. And I'm going to tell her to run an ad. I'll be right back. Because he saw that that was the single most important thing, and that he wasn't being relevant with what he was delivering, so his message certainly couldn't be relevant. The other thing that he found out was that a lot of companies, hospitals, and doctors wanted to know that they accepted all of the insurance plans. Well, he didn't, but he made an operational decision to go out and accept everything imaginable, and he did. So he became very relevant operationally as well as in his messaging. So he hired a VP of communications, he accepted all insurances, he spread the word, he got it out there as fast as he can. 2006, after becoming relevant with outcomes, he was up 40% within 6 months. And more recently, I just saw this gentleman this week, he said he's about up 35%, and his biggest problem right now is having enough people to handle all the new business. Don't we all want that problem? So when you're relevant in what you do and deliver, it makes a dramatic difference. I just found this in Consumer Reports this month, just another example of a time shot. 2002, 24% of people wanted their prescriptions filled fast. 2010, 49%. Wow. How come we waited 8 years to even measure this? I see this a lot in companies. They get a number and they kind of hang on to it for many, many years, and they don't know that things are changing. I just want to go back to that one. In that case, it was interesting because the winners were the independent drugstores. They filled prescriptions the fastest and scored the fastest. And the losers were Walmart and Walmart and CVS. Those were the kinds of companies that were not good at filling prescriptions fast. Well, the strategy may be good. We don't fill it fast, so they walk around the store a long time. But interestingly, the ones who did that well were Publix and Wegmans, grocery stores with pharmacies. They scored high in filling them fast and still got outstanding returns because people shopped well too. Just a difference in snapshot in time and results. So, how old is your message? How do you know it's relevant now? Do you know it's relevant now? Have you reviewed it for relevance? Poll number 3. Let's do this quickly and I'll keep going.
Do you have one marketing sales message for customers and prospects? Yes or no? Just waiting for our audience to respond. Again, as a reminder, just go ahead and select the answer that best suits you by selecting it on your viewer window. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll now, and let's share the results. Jaynie, it looks like 55% of our audience has selected no.
Okay. Well, good. Then I'll share some insights for them, and hopefully next time we ask, they'll say yes. Okay, so the next year, relevance caution. Is your message the same for prospects and customers? Should it be? Well, our experience shows about 50 to 60% of the time it should be different. Prospects may be buying for very different reasons than customers. PCCA is a Vistage member in Texas. A few years ago, they went through this process, and I just want to show you. Members for them are customers. Those are member pharmacies who go to PCCA for compounding chemicals. They provide chemicals that make prescriptions for any kind of compounding script. So here's a couple of things that were asked. How do you rate? How important is to you that chemicals exceed the USP standards for quality and purity? Well, interestingly enough, their existing customers, members, 76% said that was important. And you'll notice that prospects only rated it 48%. Availability of staff for consulting, wow, look at that difference, 78% to 52%. Pretty big spread in those. Well, why is that? Prospects who have not yet used them do not understand the value of these particular attributes, but people who are using it and benefiting from it clearly know that there is a difference. So, for example, the USP standards, this company, most people, if they're not in this business or not in it yet, they think that USP standards, that's federal standards, are okay, but they're really not good enough. This company finds other contaminants and they exceed the USP standards. So when we see this with an organization, we say your prospects need to be educated on the value of what you're delivering. Otherwise, they will never rate it high, and you cannot sell the same thing to prospects you sell to members. So the point is customer retention requires a different message than prospects. Down below, quality of product and product availability. Again, you see a big spread. If you're not already delineating your messages that way, you might want to find out if there is a difference, because you may be talking to existing customers with a sales pitch that prospects care about and vice versa. So prospects who have not had the benefit of experience your product value different things. Relevance for customer retention is as important as relevance for selling. We may need two different messages. We've got to find out what's different. So you might want to look at yours, discover what the differences are in customers' value for retention. And then when your prospect's message is aligned and on target, you'll have higher close rates and better lead generation. So let's talk about the relevance for each target market. Maybe you're targeting the wrong demographic. Okay, so another quick poll. Let's see what you guys say here.
Do you refine your marketing message according to the different target markets you serve? You want to go ahead and select yes or no? We'll leave the poll open for about 15 more seconds. Taking a look at how many people have voted. We've got 75% so far, just a couple more seconds. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and close out those poll results there. We have 78% of our audience selecting yes.
78% says yes. Okay. So I want you to think about what we're saying here, and then in a few minutes see if you still want to say yes or no. Okay, so target market, specific groups of customers that a company aims to capture. You might sell to small manufacturers, medium-sized, or big. You may, if you're B2C, this is a credit union I just worked with in the Midwest. They sell, their campaign is to consumers and to businesses. Those are two target markets. But within each of those segments, consumers are broken down into baby boomers, Generation X and Y, something called the Jones, which is head of household females, households in general, and then, of course, the other target market, small business owners. Each of those requires a different relevance. And most companies, in our experience, do not slice and dice it with specific relevance, not just to target markets, but also to levels of customer. So level of customer, I hear this a lot from Vistage members. Wow, it's like 5 people, 10 people in on the decision. So who are the levels of customer that you talk to? Do you talk to a CEO and then an operations manager, a CFO? So the way we break it down is who's the decision maker and who are the influencers? And have you targeted your message specifically to decision makers versus influencers? So here's a quick example. This is Big 5. This is a wonderful, wonderful tour operator who went through the process, and they had 2 target markets. They spoke to they sold to travel agents who buy their package tours and sell to you and me, the end user. So Big Five, whoops, I think I got ahead of myself there. Well, all right, so here's what they found. The travel agent wanted financial stability. They wanted to know the tour operators were responsive to complaints. They had a reputation for detail and level of tour experience. And the end user wanted staff knowledge, hiring a live person, speed of response, and willingness to customize tours. Big Five's changed its marketing message and has key advantages on the website. In the sales encounter, they've overcome price competition by using relevant messages. I want to point out that a couple of things about Big Five, if I go back a slide. For the travel agent, financial stability had never come up before, and they had to figure out how to communicate this, and they simply talked about how they paid commissions faster. But the really big thing they did on tour operators' responsiveness and reputation for detail on the travel agent side and on the end user side, having a live person, they created a concierge service, which is absolutely outstanding. I had my Vistage group, and I went to Machu Picchu last year. Big Five was the tour operator. A couple of us had some things that needed to be handled. We're in the high altitude Machu Picchu, and I had a particular issue I needed to call back on relative to the caregiving of my mother. Their concierge service took care of it. Unbelievable. They recently told me a story about a dentist in Argentina. This was just last week. I asked them what's been going on recently, and they said, dentist in the middle of the night, a dentist needed dental work. And in the middle of the night, they found a dentist in Argentina to perform a root canal. This is their concierge service that every traveler has access to 24/7. It's amazing. So they became extremely relevant to what their two target markets wanted. And you can see they're very different. This is a company who started out advertising ABC. They started out saying, we won awards, we're a family business, and we've been around for X number of years. That was irrelevant. And now they're touting that which is relevant, and they are doing extremely well, even in a time when travel is a discretionary income item. But they're doing great. Sorry, I'm speeding up here. I'm worried about time for you guys. Okay, here's their website. Just real quickly, screenshot. 5 reasons to select Big Five tour expeditions. It's right there, and there's the rest of it. They took the top 5 things that came in most important to their customers. They address it on the home page of their website. I strongly recommend that. And to travel agents, they got right in there talking about financial stability and addressed the next 3 attributes in all their communications. And they've won one of the biggest accounts out there, and they're just thrilled with what this is doing for them now that they became relevant. So determine if your message is relevant to each target market and each level of customer. A large number of you said yes. Go back and think about it. Go back and look at how you break down each of those. Window replacement company we worked with found out there was geographic relevance. They found out some things about their brand in one market and how it was perceived in another. So sometimes we need to be relevant based on the geography in which we sell and do business. So internal alignment. Let's get up to this one. If you have a question, I'll find somebody who knows. This is one that I find interesting. A couple of quick stories here. Do the employees in your organization who deliver that which is most important to your customers actually deliver that? I was invited to speak to a company group of engineers and plant managers on competitive advantage after my book came out, and I couldn't figure out why. Well, the CEO said the 2 things our customers want are quality and on-time delivery, and our plant managers are responsible for that, and it's not happening. So he was very smart connecting the dots. A bank manufacturer, a credit card manufacturer lost a big account because the plant manager did not know that their biggest client was the order he had in front of him. He judged it based on the margin that it was bringing the company, not the importance of the customer. So are we communicating internally down the line what the customer wants to the people who deliver it? And then this last one, we just did some work for a company in Canada, and they found out that their account managers who now handle 100 accounts, they were just about to have their account managers handle 200 accounts, and lo and behold, the #1 thing their customers want is responsiveness. Well, that might be in conflict. And so we need to think about those things too as we try to get aligned with our message and our operation. So what's your internal alignment? Make sure employees know the relevance of their actions to what their customers value. So many companies do this. I've done scores and scores, hundreds of Vistage talks, and frequently I'll get emails, either from a Vistage member or from people who have read my book. I get them all the time. And they'll say, oh, I read your book. I came up with great competitive advantages that are quantifiable. And they'll send me something that looks like this ad. I just found this in an airline magazine last week. Scan this ad if you're listening out there. Which one of these things, if any of them, would be a buying criteria for why you would go to this cancer center? Do you care how many square feet they have or how many locations? Not necessarily, but you might care about outcomes like VNA talked about. And so be careful of just throwing a bunch of competitive advantages at the wall without finding out which ones actually matter to your customers.
Jaynie, what would you give advice to them if they were a client of yours right now?
This cancer center?
Yeah.
I would go out and get the voice of the customer in double-blind research, and I'd say when you're choosing a cancer center, which is the most important? I'd probably test about 20 attributes. Some of these and maybe another 10 that aren't here, such as outcomes and who are the specialists and how many doctors do we have that are renowned. And once I knew that, I would lead with 2 or 3 things in this ad that are most important to the buying criteria. This list is too long, and it has too many things in there that are irrelevant. There might be something in here that's relevant, but it's going to be lost in all of this clutter. And I see so many companies do this.
Thanks.
Okay. And then we'll do poll number 5, and I'll wrap it up for you pretty soon.
Our last poll, do you think your current messaging reflects competitive advantages that are relevant to your customers and prospects? Again, as one final reminder, you'll just want to go ahead and select the answer that best suits you by clicking on it in the middle of your viewer window. We have about 5 seconds left here on the poll. There we go. Let me go ahead and share those results. Jaynie, the results show 19% selected yes, 48% selected halfway there, and 33% select need improvement.
Okay, well, that's great. Thank you, folks, for filling in that. So let's just say the problem and why do we have irrelevant messages. Irrelevant messages are the direct result of not getting the voice of our customer, not investing in what our customers value, and not using that as a blueprint. And I just want to say, I'm not a market research firm. We use it in our process, and we use firms, and we make sure our clients get this important data because it gets you that alignment. Sometimes another reason we have irrelevant messages, and no offense to any salespeople out there, this is true for all of us. We cannot assume that the sales force is good feedback or a good way of gathering the voice of the customer. They're negotiating when they're talking to us. Most of us are not trained to listen the way a researcher is when they're asking unbiased questions. So how do we do that? What's the answer? My absolute belief is that the solution is well-designed competitive advantage statements, what I talk about in book 1, based on the voice of the customer. Which ones matter? Let's not just come up with a bunch of statements and throw them at the wall. Which ones are relevant to your target market, to your level of customer, to your prospect versus your customer, who in that group is a decision maker versus an influences, and how has it changed over time? What disciplines do we have internally that are giving us the time, the right time alignment and relevance? And then, of course, internally aligning it so that we're relevant in the period in time. So I started with this. I'm going to wrap up with this. The value proposition has to be relevant, measurable, and relative to their choices. And if we don't lose sight of this and we get relevant, it dramatically affects close rate and customer retention. So I'm always asked, do I follow my own advice? And believe me, it's just as hard for me to do it as it is for you. So there's my website, Why Smart Advantage, and our bullet points. And like everybody else, I need to clean it up. It's got my answers to why us, but it always needs work. And we're constantly doing the research and finding out what's current. And I suggest that you all do that as well. So it's, this is based on the first book plus the second book that's coming out this summer. I'm going to lead now to Mark for Q&A.
Well, this follows well on what you just said. A number of the people listening and the participants want to know when exactly is the drop date on that book, and when should they start looking for it?
The date is early summer. On the website, I have on my website, it didn't show up here, I do have a reserve a book for from the first edition. They can go there. It should be out early summer, and we're closing in on it.
Okay, good. All right, here's a question that came in a while ago. We have rebranded our company recently, and on the revamp of our website, we, among the management team, have different views on being transparent to our customers and potential customers, and getting through the fears of our competitors. How do I satisfy both sides? I do not want to put relevant information on our website due to the fact that a competitor might see it. How should we deal with this?
Okay, so there's a couple of things there. One is the disagreement internally. We find that often when we ask companies internally to please vote on what they think their customers value most, 99% are in disagreement. Nobody in the company agrees.
So they're in good standing then.
Right, so that's number one, and so we've got to get everybody on the same page. As far as I always say, you don't want to keep your best-kept competitive advantages that are relevant to your customers top secret so that your competitors won't find out. I think you have to put it out there, and I do understand there are some exceptions to the rule, and maybe you use it in your sales one-to-one call messaging and not on your website, but don't hold it so close to the vest that nobody benefits from it.
Okay. For the block and tackle Vistage company that is in the service business, tend to be local and are very, very successful, and you see this type of business over and over again in your travels, Jaynie. What's the first thing they should do tomorrow based on all of the work you've done over the last 20 years?
I'm not sure I understand it. A service company?
Service, not manufacturing, because we're going to get to manufacturing in a minute.
Okay.
Service company. So an architect, a insurance brokerage,
yeah, same thing.
Interior company.
Same thing. I mean, the travel agent is a service company. I mean, so many businesses, architects, we've done this work for many service companies. It's no different. They have a list of attributes that people want. And the only thing I will say is a lot of companies, whether it's their service or the product, they get too hung up on trying to find messages around their service or their product. More often than not, it's not what you sell, it's how you sell it. And I don't know if I can make that any more clear in this short time, but it may be how quickly you get it to me as opposed to that you get it to me, because most businesses end up being somewhat commoditized and I can get it elsewhere. But you know what? You pick up the phone in 2 rings, you fix problems within 3 hours, and that's why I choose you. And that's true for service companies as well as it is for manufacturing or any product company.
I'm going to follow up with a question of my own based on my experience with Vistage groups, is that they may be listening to all of this and saying, great idea, love it. It's not a forest fire, and I've got forest fires I'm putting out right now, so I'll get to it when I can. You must face this a lot. How do you handle that?
Well, I face it as it does anybody who has any kind of discipline, and I completely understand everybody's putting out fires. Here's my message to people about that. It's the difference between, as we say in Vistage, working on the business versus in it. You get your best leverage, your best growth from on the business activities. This is an on the business activity that can bring you really to the next level, increase your close rate, increase your cash flow. And it's critical. It's critical to staying healthy. And as Warren Buffett says, companies that create a moat around itself are the people who will survive. And so I always tell Vistage members, you're in the moat building business. Competitive advantages, as Warren Buffett says, are your moats, and you got to be focused on them.
All right, I mentioned manufacturing earlier. This question is very specific. Can you suggest how a manufacturing company, which is focused on contract manufacturing, so I guess this is half and half between manufacturing and service, how can they do a double-blind study?
they go to their customers and prospects the same way. I'm not sure who I would need to know who a contract manufacturer is. I mean, they would use.
Well, let me guess right here and see if I can give a little bit more.
So unless I'm misunderstanding, they use a market research firm. They don't do it themselves. You have to use a market research firm to do this. So
then I guess that may be the question right there. Go ahead, hit on that, and tell us the difference between you trying to send out a survey yourself and hiring people who really know what they're doing.
Absolutely, and I'm sorry, I meant to do this earlier. Customer satisfaction survey is not market research. That's just a report card for how you're doing. So if you go out and ask, A, they know it's you, B, they're just telling you how well you're doing in customer service or response time. The market research, again, is double blind. Customers don't know it's you. You remove all the bias from the answers and the questions, and you get an aggregate data of what the preponderance of people are looking for. Many companies are misled by their customer satisfaction surveys. If I say to you, Mark, how do you rate, how important is customer service? You're going to say, what? It's a 10. So what did I learn? Nothing. So, the attributes, the way we design the questionnaires is we break that down into what are the customer service touch points that matter in this field, in this industry, to these prospects, to these customers. So there's a fair amount that goes into the actual design of the questionnaire. It's not something that most companies are equipped to do themselves.
Okay, great. Joe Rena asks a question that I hear also from the Vistage members that I speak with, and he says, regarding target market relevance, do you recommend different web portals for web visitors to match their values? And I'm going to try to make this a little bit easier to go through. Different websites for different audiences, yay or nay?
Yes, I do. In some cases, depending on the industry, you can have different tabs within a website, but if they're big enough target markets, you should have separate websites for each one.
All right. If you were a Vista, and I'm going to harp on this one more time because I know there are people out there that are listening to this. We've got over 200 on board, but they're still not feeling they can do it. Maybe they're only at 1.5 million in sales. Maybe they just hit the 20 employee mark. Can you give us an extra bounce as to why almost anyone should be considering doing this type of double-blind research?
If you're a small company and you want to be a big company, you need to do this research.
Good.
This research is fundamental to getting your blueprint for going forward. We've seen companies increase revenues 20, 30, 40%. We had one guy who's up 100%. And it's a relatively small company. I mean, we see it all the time. It makes a huge difference in your ability to connect with, it's common sense. I'm not saying anything here that's not common sense. If you talk to me about what I value, you got a better chance of doing business with me. If you talk to me about what we call a smart advantage, blah, 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 then I don't care. And you look like everybody else, and I'm going to buy on price.
Well, Jaynie, you've given us A, inspiration, and B, very hardcore tips based on data that has all of us thinking they got to run out and chat with somebody. There are your contact numbers right there, which we want everyone to take advantage of. The archive of this presentation will be in the archive on the Vistage View probably sometime Monday, depending on how all the IT dominoes line up, but Monday then. So you can go back, listen to this with your team members. Make sure they go listen to it because this is the type of value that Vistage adds, and Jaynie knows what she's talking about. 22 years as a Vistage chair. Jaynie, I don't get to say this with all the presenters, but as someone who knows you personally and as a friend, I've been delighted to work with you today. This has been a great presentation. Thank you for your efforts.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it.
All right, and do we have a title for the next book, or is that still in the mix?
It's called Relevant Selling.
Relevant Selling.
Yep.
Go pre-order right now. Not you, Jaynie, everyone else. All right, we have to say goodbye now, but for next time, Friday, April 29th, and don't forget this year we are starting at 10 o'clock on the Pacific time, 1 o'clock on the East Coast, cutting-edge cardiovascular advances, putting the CEO health at the heart of business matters. So all of us who wonder if the stress of running a business takes its toll, well, it is, and we're going to figure out how to get that toll lessened with Dr. Bruce Sachs. For Fridays with Vistage, this is Mark Wiskop thanking you very much for joining us today. and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Bye-bye. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, Jaynie, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar, The Price You Pay for Irrelevant Marketing Messages. Once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation, and we would appreciate if you would complete that survey and provide us with your feedback. You will also receive a follow-up email by next Tuesday with a link to view a recording of today's webinar. On behalf of Vistage and our presenters, thank you for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day.